one to the November 15th, 2014 edition of Global Newsmaker Focus with co-hosts Vernell and Patrice. Our program broadcasts Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern on the United Public Radio Network and the UPRN Network, 107.7 FM New Orleans, Louisiana, and 107.9 FM and 105.3 FM Henderson Pass Christian, Mississippi. Tonight's guest, author Doug Hess, will be speaking on the topic, how to prepare the right attitude to gain success, whether in the workplace or in life. Doug will discuss his book, co-authored with Dave Bowman, Gordon Gekko, CEO, Lessons from Wall Street for a Winning Attitude. Now, Vernell, there's a great quote there you found that Doug had made. Great quote.
Yeah, thank you, Patrice, and welcome again. We're really happy to have you on our show tonight, and we know that our listeners are going to be thoroughly pleased with everything that you're going to give us a handle on. So the quote is, research indicates that a simple turn in your attitude will make all the difference in the world, whether it's your health, having better relationships, or furthering your careers. Attitude drives so many different aspects of our lives. We even found that people with positive attitudes make more money.
And indeed,
go ahead, Patrice.
Your book, Gordon Gekko, CEO, Lessons from Wall Street for Winning Attitude, Doug, presents very effective and pragmatic points. Vernell and I really are looking forward to discussing your material tonight. First question, how did this book come about, Doug? Also, for a listening audience, I know you'll want to get this book. It's available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com. On the book cover, your full names are noted, David L. Bowman and Douglas E. Hess. But now back about the origin of the book. How did you decide to team up to write it?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your program this evening. It's I think we're going to have a great night tonight. And to answer your question, how did this come about? Dave Bowman and I are good friends. We're colleagues. We're co-workers together. And I think like most people, all of us have a bucket list or a wish list of things that we'd like to accomplish in life and get done. And I'm no different, and Dave isn't either. And on that was to write a book. But I'm like so many other people. I wanted to write a book, but it was one of those things, it's probably on my wish list and I'll never get around to it. But one day, out of the blue, Dave gives me a call and he says, hey, Doug, I have an extra ticket to a Get Motivated seminar. Would you like to attend? And I said, oh, yeah, Dave, I'd love to attend. And then about 10 minutes later, I called him back up and I said, oh, Dave, what's a Get Motivated seminar? I've never been to one. And I don't know if your listeners have been to one of those Get Motivated seminars, but it was a seminar where they bring in all these different speakers, guest speakers, and they're really there to motivate you and get you fired up for your desires, your passion, your concerns that you might have. And the day that we were there, Bill Cosby was a speaker, Steve Forbes, Rudy Giuliani, Terry Bradshaw, just to name a few that were there. And about halfway through the session, we were in the process of, or they were in the process of changing speakers. And I got up and we were stretching our legs and I looked over at Dave and I said, you know what, Dave, I've got an idea for a book. And I told him the concept of the book. And at the moment, I didn't know if he was just enthusiastic from being there or if he really thought I had a good idea for a book. And then from there, I took that idea. We reached out to a couple of publishers and they came back and the rest is what we would say is history.
Boy, that sounds like a very interesting origin. You know, both you and Dave have experienced success in business, and you've relied on your own experience and success in advising your readers. Wonderful suggestions. Doug, your emphasis on the right attitude as being key also was quite a factor in your book. Could you mention some of the steps the individual should take when faced with certain obstacles and opportunities? Again, you feel that the right attitude is really central to being able to meet these challenges.
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to hear that question. I'm sorry.
Let me repeat that. I know I'm hearing a little bit of an echo myself. Of course, we're all speaking between such vast distances here. Doug, you mentioned some of the steps the individual should take when faced with obstacles and also opportunities. You believe that the right attitude is key to preparing these challenges.
Right. And really the first thing that it really boils down to is sacrifice. What type of sacrifice are you willing to make in order to achieve your goal or your dream? When it comes to having the right attitude, that's going to reflect what direction that we're going to move in. And are we going to take an obstacle and just look at it as an obstacle, something that's going to block us from doing whatever we want to do? Or are we going to look at that obstacle and say, you know what, that's just a temporary block in my path. Am I going to go around it? Am I going to go over it? Am I going to go under it? Am I going to crawl underneath it? In order to achieve my dream. And we talk about this in the book, chapter number 1 is every dream has a price. And really it boils down to what type of sacrifices are you willing to make in order to achieve that goal, whether it's a long-term or a short-term goal. And one of the examples that we give in the book is, take for example, a single parent. A single parent wanting to go back to school in order to maybe get a better job, to get a promotion, and to better his or her family in the long term. Well, in that process, especially if you have children, you're probably going to have to make sacrifices saying, well, if I go to school, I'm not going to be able to go to my kids' soccer practice, swim practice, dance recital, etc., because I'm going to have to be home studying for a test, writing a term paper, going to class, etc. And so those are things that only you as an individual can make, and it's going to be something that's going to be different for each of us. And so the question really becomes, what sacrifices are you willing to make in order to achieve your dreams or your goals? Number 2, the next step, we talk about really is money never sleeps in the book. That's in chapter number 2. But what we're really referring to is just plain old-fashioned hard work and not resting on one's laurels. So getting out, making sure that your job is achieved, your goal is being reached. And so many times I think we look at opportunities and they're disguised as hard work, or they wear overalls, and we're not willing to make that sacrifice and put in that little bit of work, a little bit of extra effort to take us to that next level in the process. So really, we're talking about chapter 2, when money never sleeps. What we're really saying is you have to work hard, because in order to achieve any of your dreams, any of your goals, it's really going to come down to hard work and making sure that you have that right attitude every single day, because we know that there are always going to be obstacles or something's going to come in your way, and you have to be determined to achieve that end goal or that end result.
That sounds as though that's very important information for the business owner or the would be very successful employee. For now, checking down that research on the book, do you see that little the bulletin about the success story of the 2 business entrepreneurs?
I don't have it right in front of me, but I remember reading it.
Yes, dear. It was on the work that we had just on our outline that we prepared before. That's an interesting example.
I'm sorry, ladies. I'm just having a hard time hearing that question.
Well, we so enjoyed the book. We were going over some of the examples, and your book notes a success story of 2 business entrepreneurs. I don't know if I should name them. They did devise an excellent preparatory system. It was a revolutionary test preparatory students for service for students. It emphasized innovation and availability for their students, and Renelle and I were thinking that indeed you emphasize, you focus on traits of innovation and ability, which are very positive factors in promoting one's business or career. You note that these parties always maintain that attitude of the scrappy underdog to promote and develop their business. It was a very powerful example.
I am just so sorry. I'm just hearing bits and pieces, and I'm not able to hear the whole question. I'm so sorry.
No, let me repeat it. I'm having a little bit of a difficulty with the echo, too. Your book notes the success story of two business entrepreneurs, first names Jake and Ramit, who founded a revolutionary test preparatory service for students, and in their work emphasized innovation and availability for their students. How are these traits of innovation and availability very positive factors in promoting one's business or career? You mentioned the importance of maintaining that attitude of the scrappy underdog to promote and develop one's business. Also, that the concept of delivering even more than what the client or customer is expecting.
Well, if I think I'm hearing the question right, I think you're referring to the story that we talk about in Chapter 1, talking about making sacrifices. Yes, and it's really just going, again, talking about the different sacrifices that one has to make in order to achieve one's dream or one's goal. And I think so many times when it comes to sacrifices, we all talk big, or a lot of people talk big in terms of this goal and this dream, but when they really get down to it, we realize just how much hard work or how much we have to give up or how much we have to sacrifice in order to achieve that goal and that dream. And I think that's what really separates a lot of people out, ones that are very successful, is not only do they recognize that there's going to be hard work and challenges in order to achieve whatever he or she wants to achieve, but the difference is they still plunge ahead. They're still forging ahead in the process. And I think the rest of them sit back and go, I still have that idea, I have that goal, or I have that dream, but I didn't realize there was going to be this much hard work, or I didn't realize I was going to have this much of a sacrifice in order to achieve whatever it is that one wants to achieve. And I think that right there in itself is what separates a lot of people. We all have dreams, we all have goals, we all have ideas, but I think when the rubber meets the road, that's what really separates the majority of the people, and it's those few, those chosen ones that take it to the next level and are very successful. And it doesn't mean because we don't take it to the next level that we can't be successful or we're not successful. I think the reason a lot of us, or a lot of people, don't take it to the next level is out of fear, the unknown. We don't know what we don't know, and so a lot of times we're saying, well, what happens if I fail? Well, that's a strong possibility. Matter of fact, when it comes to a new business, they say in the first 5 years, 80% of all new businesses fail. And you know what? The difference between the ones that failed and the ones that didn't even put it out there at all is the fact that they just set it out there and they give it a shot. They give it their best effort. And sometimes your best effort is going to fail, and from there you have decisions to make. Am I going to try it again, learn from my mistakes, and press on? Or am I just going to stop and say, hey, I fought the good fight, and that's good enough? And so really having that attitude is so important. Almost that I can do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to achieve it at all cost attitude, to some degree is what separates the very successful from those that want to be very successful.
Well, indeed, you mentioned the fact that the individual should be on the lookout for resources and opportunities to promote his business and develop business strategies, products, and services to meet the consumer or client needs. And there are two great examples there, such as the client ready to take a telephone call at 2 a.m. to speak with a potential client, and also the vignette where you and your Doug were ready to provide information, services, and even resources such as pens and paper to a potential client.
Yeah, that's a story that we talk about in our book. That I do a lot of traveling for our jobs. Dave and I both did. And one day that I was sitting late in a hotel about 2:00 in the morning, and all of a sudden my iPhone goes off, and I get up. I see that a client of mine had sent me an email at 2:00 in the morning, and so I was able to address it. Luckily, that I knew the answer that he needed. I sent it back to him, and within about 5 minutes later, he emails me right back, and he's like, I didn't expect you to get that until tomorrow morning. What are you doing up at 2:00 in the morning answering my question? And I replied back to him, what are you doing up at 2:00 in the morning even asking a question? Come to find out, he was up because he had a brand new baby, and it was his turn, as he would like to say with his wife, his turn to feed the baby and rock it. And he was very impressed how I was able to respond to him basically at 2:00 in the morning. Now, part of that I would say was pure luck on my part, because a lot of times when I travel, I don't sleep very well on the road, and so anything would wake me up. But I think it just shows that, you know, I think especially in today's economy, in today's environment, you almost have to be constantly available. And we can get into the pros and cons in that, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I think just kind of setting yourself apart, having that attitude that I want to exceed and I'm going to make sure that my clients are happy, is a positive thing. And him and I, which my client, we have a great relationship, and he'll from time to time tease me about that, how, yeah, you can get a hold of Doug even at 2:00 in the morning to get your answers met. But I think it's just all about, again, having that right attitude, wanting to make sure that whatever job that you do, whether you have customers or clients or whatever we refer to them as, just making sure that they are taken care of, and that, you know, you're in there in the game.
Yes, it's so important to really address the clients' or customers' needs. And Renelle, can you hear us? She'll be right back. Renelle?
Yeah.
Because I know she...
Yeah.
I was going to say...
There's a lot of echoing here.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, Renelle, feel free to address any of the questions, because I know both and I really loved preparing them, and we really enjoyed reading your material.
Well, thank you.
I really feel that your attitude determines your altitude.
Oh, thank you. You said you really enjoyed that one?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just having a terrible time hearing you ladies this evening. I don't know why.
I know the connection is really poor tonight.
Yeah, I don't know why that is, but and so I apologize if I'm not completely hearing everything correctly. I'm trying my hardest to listen and answer what I think I'm hearing, and so if I
You're doing.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording...
To simply leave your message, press 1. To review the message, press 2. To re-record the message, press
Are we all connected?
The big guest, I think, should be joining us soon.
Wow.
Hello?
Hi, Doug. Thank you for your patience. You're back now, and thanks. Our great station manager has called the three of us back. I think the echo, that slight bit of echo now is resolved.
Awesome.
Doug, too, your book does give such pragmatic advice. For example, you note that education is important. It can be marvelous, but most important is the ability of the individual to precisely and effectively meet the needs of his employer or customer to be really successful in that position.
Yes, so many times, like you said, education is so important, and Dave and I both are big fans of education and believe in education. But it's like you just mentioned, so many times when it comes to that, just because you have an education doesn't mean that it's going to meet your customers' needs or desires or your employers. And what we really mean by that is sometimes you can almost be a little bit too educated or too smart, if you will, for your employer or for your customers, because sometimes we try to make things more complicated than what they really are. And I know I've done it myself, and I'm talking to myself more than I'm talking to anybody. Sometimes something that can be really simple, we try to make it a little bit harder based on our education, and sometimes we can be our own worst enemy in that process. Sometimes less is more. And what I mean by that is, sometimes when we're talking to a client or we're talking to a potential employer, sometimes we almost talk ourselves out of a position or out of a job because we're talking too much, we're trying to impress, we're trying to tell everybody our accomplishments, when really that's not what they really want to know. They assume that you're successful, that you're smart, you're an intelligent individual because you got your foot in the door. They just want to talk to you. They just want to hear you for who you are, not so much sometimes of who we want to make ourselves out to be.
Great advice. Doug, I have a quick question. In
Sure.
your book, you advise that every dream has a price. What's the connotation that you place on price? I mean, just exactly what are you meaning when you use the word price in this way?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to when we say price, we're really saying sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to achieve your dream? Going back earlier to the fact of a single parent going to school, are you willing to sacrifice, or is that price that you're willing to pay, is that missing your children's activities in order to study, to get a college degree, whether it's an associate or a 4-year bachelor's degree or whatever the case might be, to, again, have a long-term impact for a better job, a promotion, etc. So really not a financial price or, not something that we're asking how much of a financial check are you willing to write, but what type of sacrifice are you willing to make in order to achieve your dreams in your goals?
So do you think that money can be translated into sacrifice of time, money and personal interest to develop one's business?
Sure, I think it's possible that money could turn into that. Everybody's a little different in that sense. Everybody has their own take. Everybody has their own definition when it comes to price. I think so much society, the world, I think so many times we do put a financial price on everything, and I don't know if everything has to be given a dollar sign or a dollar amount. I really believe that a lot of it is just going back to the good old-fashioned sacrifice. How much hard work, how much effort are you willing to put into it in order to achieve your dream or achieve your goal?
Great information.
Indeed, it is wonderful information. And you know, Doug, you also point out that individuals must be open to business opportunity. You mentioned a wonderful account in your book of a landscaper employee who, after learning of his landscaper employer's decision to not cover a certain prior customer area, to cancel landscaping service in that area, researched that market. The employee then ethically contacted his then landscaper employer, and now the former employee, with the former employer's blessing and this employee's own insight, initiative, and industry, has developed a wonderful landscaper business in that particular market.
Yeah, and I think the key right there you talked about is going after. So basically, for our listeners, just to kind of set the tone real quick, it's basically with this company, the landscaping business, there was a particular market that basically, when it came down to that, the employer didn't want to expand, get any bigger, and sometimes companies do that. They get to a particular size, or the owner of an organization has something in mind, and that's exactly where they are. They're very comfortable. They don't necessarily want to reach out and expand, and that's okay. Everybody has their own definition of what that success is for them. And in this particular example, the right thing was to go to the employer, ask for his blessing, because throughout the book, one thing we definitely want to stress is to make sure that people are doing things not undercut, not trying to be sneaky, not trying to backstab, but do things ethically, do things right. Because Dave and I both believe that you're going to get farther ahead long term by doing everything correctly, be morally correct. And then this individual was able to go out and establish his own business and is thriving today very well based on his expertise that he had from his former employer. And so really going out, seeing a niche or a need, and having that vision and being willing to take that risk to step out on his own to start his own business. And I think so many times a lot of us will see that there's a need or a niche there, and a lot of us will talk very big and say, oh, you know what, it would be a great idea if we did this, this, and that. And that's where we go. And that's as far as we go. We're talk. We're not willing to take that next step, that leap of faith, if you will, in order to start the business, because I think so many times, again, we get back to we don't know what we don't know, and that's the fear of the unknown. And so many times we're afraid that we're going to fail in the process. And sometimes just by taking a nice leap of faith out there, great things can happen to us. But it's taking that step, getting past that first hurdle is the hardest part.
That's very motivational.
You know, I have a question. It may be off color, so feel free to say, you'll speak to me in private if you don't want to answer this right now. But where does the idea of micromanagement come into play once a person has, decided that they're going to make the best of everything and put forth their very best foot and, even give all of the essential points that are needed to clarify where their work ethic is, but you have an employer that feels the need to micromanage whatever it is that you're doing. Can attitude in any way adjust that so that you don't become, impatient and respond negatively?
Right. I think what your question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if I misunderstood your question, but basically you're saying is basically how can somebody that's a manager kind of get the right attitude or change their ways in order to not really be a micromanager? Is that a fair way of restating the question?
Correct. Yes, that's
okay.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to micromanagers, I have found that a lot of times with micromanagers, it's their personality. They need to have that type of information. That there's somebody that's constantly needing information. But I think really the underlying issue, and of course, I don't want to paint everybody with this broad paintbrush, but I think a lot of times when it comes to a micromanager, that they're kind of afraid of who's underneath them, because 9 times out of 10, those are pretty probably pretty smart individuals. They're ambitious individuals. They're aggressive individuals. And I think sometimes micromanagers are afraid that people underneath them are sometimes a little bit more successful or eager, and they're kind of afraid that they're going to be left behind in the process in terms of that. So when it comes to really changing somebody's attitude, it really comes back to an educational process and making sure that micromanager knows that, that they're the boss in the process. But, every book that you read or you go out to these different speakers that talk to you, most of the time what they're going to tell you is you want to have people beneath you or underneath you that are smart, eager individuals, and not to be afraid to let them grow, because probably the best thing that a manager can do in terms of providing or showing how valuable he or she is to have literally trained individuals beneath them and have them to be promoted equal or higher to them in the process. So really it really comes down to an educational process. And again, we fear the unknown.
Yeah, okay. That makes so much sense. Because I think if you can understand where that element is coming from, you know as the recipient of such behavior how to respond, because I guess the natural response is like, get off my back. But in a lot of instances, that might not be the best response.
Yeah, probably not the best response to a boss. Tell me to get off your back in the process, even though that's exactly what everybody wants to say is, leave me alone and with that. But I really think when it comes to somebody that's a micromanager, I again, not everybody, I don't want to paint everybody with that brush, but I think it really comes down to a little bit of the fear, they don't know. And number two, you really just got to educate those individuals. And that's hard. That is really hard, because when somebody comes in with already with an attitude or a perception of XYZ, it takes time in order to change their views. And that's something you have to take into consideration. Those are not going to be things that you're going to be able to change overnight, but that's going to be a work in progress. It's going to take possibly years to change somebody's attitude, especially when it comes to a micromanager, because they have to learn to let go, and that's not easy.
Sage advice.
Very sage advice for now. I agree. Very sage advice. Doug, you mentioned a very interesting concept, bagging the elephant or obtaining the key client.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating term, bagging the elephant.
Yeah, how does that happen?
Well, if your listeners remember the movie Wall Street, which Gordon Gekko played, Michael Douglas played Gordon Gekko, was a corporate raider, and Bud Fox was played by Charlie Sheen. And basically what he does, Charlie Sheen's character, he wants to be a player. He wants to get into the league with the big boys. And so basically there's a scene in the movie where it says, here's a kid that's called me 59 consecutive days. There should be a picture of you in the dictionary under persistence, kid. And basically that's where the bagging the elephant came from, that it was with his professional persistence, he was able to, quote unquote, bag the elephant or achieve that client or win that client over. And I think what the key there is professional persistence. Most of the time when you walk into a client's office, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to sign with you on the spot, because they want to develop a relationship, make sure that you know the business, that you're going to be able to cater to their needs, understand their concerns, etc. And so what we have found, Dave and I have found, is that you have to develop a professional persistency in the market or in life in general. And that is to bring value every time that you speak to somebody, but at the same time, you don't want to be hammering them and being a pest to them every single day or every single week. basically you want to bring value and not just call somebody or visit somebody to be calling and visit somebody, but when you do call them, when you do visit them, make sure that you bring valuable information, that you're not necessarily wasting their time, and you're not trying to come off as that, only reason I'm here is because I want to sell. I know Dave and I, from our personal experience, know sometimes that it takes years to develop that relationship with a particular client in order to win their trust and to win their, whether
confidence.
Confidence, or the account, whatever word that we look at, putting in them. But just being professionally persistent, I think has paid off for us tremendous over the years, is that we just don't walk into somebody's office and say, hey, it's us again. Remember us, we're going to do business with you. But making sure that when we walk in that we're bringing something of value to them, and over time they'll know that. And I don't know how many times I've heard clients come to me and say, Doug, thank you for your professional persistence. And I'll say, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be pushy. I know that in today's environment, it's out of sight, out of mind. It happens. And they're like, no. You were professional. You brought things to us, and you kept this on our mind. And so thank you. And I think that's really a paid off for me, and I know Dave well as well professionally in our profession by just being professionally persistent.
That's excellent information. You note another example in your book of through the professional persistence of yourself and Dave, you did receive a wonderful client by showing him through periodic visits and reports how your business could most effectively meet their needs and represent the best choice for that client. But also you wisely note that all clients are important and not to underserve the others while attempting to bag the elephant.
Yeah, and I think so many times that, especially in sales and marketing, so many times that we look at the big clients because we think that they're the ones that are going to have the biggest commission or the biggest payoff.
Yeah.
And over here, we forget that the small clients, you know what, they're important too. And something I know that Dave and I always think about is we want to serve everybody equally because we never know. Now, don't get me wrong. We like the big clients because of the big payday. Yes, we get that.
Right.
But our philosophy is this. You never know when tomorrow the individual that's at that small client level is going to be at a medium-sized company or at the big level company. Because things happen. Crazy things happen in this world. And we just want to be in the position where somebody that does take it from a small firm to a medium or a larger firm one day goes, you know what, I like those two guys. They always treated me well no matter where I was in the chain of command or in that process. And so by making sure that your smaller clients as well as your larger clients are all served equally, one day you hope that those will have a bigger payday for you long term. So making sure that everybody is taken care of across the board and not just looking at today, but looking and having an investment for tomorrow in the future. So we're making that long-term investment that may or may not pay off. But you know what? The big client may or may not pay off either. I could be spending all my time and money and energy and not get that account, but I got to make sure that these smaller accounts are being taken care of as well, because they might be the ones that actually pay bigger dividends for me down the road.
Okay, period.
Very interesting information. And you know, Doug, your book has a chapter entitled "The Most Valuable Commodity is Information." Why do you think information is more valuable than any other component of promoting and sustaining a business? Please mention details to us as to what makes information so valuable.
Yeah, no, that was probably one of my favorite chapters to write in the whole book with Dave. Was the most valuable the commodity I know of is information. And I think so many times that we we think that money is important, that we think some other type of commodity, whether it's oil or gold or some other precious metal, is important. And don't get us wrong, those are all important. If you don't have good information, you can't make sound investments. And what I mean by investments, not necessarily financial investments, but investments in individuals, investments in life in general. And so you have to have information. Something that I'm constantly doing, and that Dave and I recommend to everybody, is you have to read. Get out there and read. And don't read about things that you already know. Try to learn things that you don't know to make you a better rounded person, because you never know what type of situation you're going to find yourself into, that you're going to need to be able to speak intelligently about other things. I think so many times that we get so wrapped up in our particular profession that we don't realize that there's other professions out there. And so when we run into a client or we meet a new friend or a new relationship, all we want to do is talk about what we do, because that's all we know. And what we're trying to say is, with information, go out there, spread your knowledge out there so you can talk intelligently to no matter who you meet. And people aren't going to pigeon you and say, well, Doug's a great guy, but if you don't read his book and you don't talk about his book, the guy's clueless. He doesn't know what's going on out there. And so what we're trying to say is, go out there and learn as much as you can about everything, different subject matters, so you'll come across as a well-rounded individual. And I think that's going to pay, again, big dividends, not only in your personal relationship with individuals, but also with your clients as well.
Very good. And do you think it's a good idea to keep a journal of, I would say the classic instances where you are having a winning attitude, so to speak? In this way, looking back at things?
Yeah, again, I think that's something that's going to differ for individuals. Some people need that journal to write things down. I know myself, I'm somebody that I need to write things down, or I quickly forget. But I have a great ability to go, you know what, it's in that journal right there is the information I need. And then I have to go out there and I have to refresh myself from time to, I can go, yep, I remember exactly what it is. And then there's others, I think, that just have that knack, that just are like a sponge. They absorb everything that is thrown at them, and they don't necessarily need that to be able to write down. So I think that's a great idea. The key thing I would say for all of this is, you know yourself better than anybody. And as long as you're honest with yourself when you're really having a review or talking about this and that, do I need a journal or can I remember it? As long as you can pull yourself aside and be honest with who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are, I think that's the key. I think so many times we're not honest about ourselves to ourselves because we're afraid that if we say no to this area or we're not able to do this, others are going to look at us as being weak. And society, in today's society, we go, we can't be weak. We got to be strong. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to be Superman. And guess what? We're not Superman. We all fall short. We all have weaknesses. We all have things that we could strive to do a little bit better. And I think we just have to be honest with ourselves. And I think that's something that, we're craving others to be honest with us. That so many times we're not honest with ourselves.
I guess the journal part is good, and I've heard this over and over, but you know that thing about don't write down anything that you wouldn't want to see in the newspaper or something like that. And I guess it's just, kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, yeah, it would be a good reference for me, but in the wrong hands, it might be misinterpreted. So when you talk about honesty,
Well, I think with honesty, you don't necessarily have to write it down. I think so many times you just need to spend 15, 20 minutes with yourself, maybe get a cup of coffee and just sit down and relax and just kind of have a little talk with yourself. And just not necessarily have to write things down, because like you said, they could get in the wrong hands and somebody could manipulate that information. But just knowing who you are, know who you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and being honest with yourself so the next time a situation comes up and somebody says, hey, does anybody need help with X, Y, and Z? You can go, raise your hand and go, you know what, maybe I do need a little help on that. And so really, when it comes to being honest with yourself, I'm a big fan of just spending some time with yourself. Everybody needs a little bit of time to unwind, power down a little bit. And that's when you can have those private talks with yourself, if you will, and just reflect and say, you know, Doug, here's one of my weaknesses, and this is what that weakness is. And yep, I know it. I can't pretend like that's not an issue.
Because I think in some places, sorry, I was just saying, Patrice, were you speaking? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, pardon my interruption. Please go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking that in the workplace sometimes you find these people and you know that they want to advance their careers and they're interested in, you know, moving up the ladder, you know, fast. And I think we all run into them, and we call them, they kiss up a lot, so to speak.
Yep.
I mean, that to me seems like it's I think it's a learned characteristic as opposed to being something that's natural. I mean, is that a habit that can be broken?
Well, yes, but here's the thing. I would say that the individual that's the golden boy, sometimes you hear him, or the ones that's kissing up, they're probably not going to break that cycle. They don't want to break that cycle because why would they want to break their golden ticket, if you will, the way that they're advancing? And so that's even tougher because I think most of the time people know that they're kissing up to individuals or they're considered the golden boy and they can't do any wrong in that process. And so in order to change that cycle, that might be one of the toughest that has to, in order to be broken, because the individual that would be the one that needs to break that cycle probably is not going to want to break the cycle because of the benefits that he or she is already receiving.
Okay.
And so that one's really, really tough because if I'm kissing up to somebody and I'm getting an advancement and I'm doing well, what incentive would there be for me to break that cycle?
Yeah, but in all instances it doesn't work. So how does the person face up to the fact that this is not working?
Well, that's another great question. So if I'm the individual that's trying to kiss up to the boss and I'm not getting anywhere with that, hopefully at some point that's going to dawn on me. I'm going to say, you know what, Doug, this isn't working. And I think so many times that people are trying to, kiss up or be the teacher's pet. Maybe we'll use that word out
exactly.
there. The teacher's pet is because they're trying to get noticed. They're trying to stand out. And I think a lot of times society has actually rewarded people that's trying to stand out. I mean, if you step back and we took an honest look out there with today's society, don't we reward people, if you will, for being different, for taking that risk, taking that gamble to be different? I mean, look at our sports stars, look at our celebrities, et cetera, people that seem to do crazy things. Society tends to reward
Well, it
reward
used to be
them.
true of just one industry, more or less Hollywood or something like that,
Yep.
but now you find it in the grocery store.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Again, I think everybody, and again, I use that word everybody very loosely, but a lot of people, they want to be, they need that attention. They crave that. And I think that's why they try to act out, be the teacher's pet, et cetera, because they're craving something that they don't have. They're trying to fill a void that they don't have. And again, until they're going to be honest with themselves of what that is that they're needing, that they're craving, again, I think that's going to be a tough cycle to break. And how do you break somebody, or how do you talk to somebody that has that void that they're trying to fill? Sometimes they have the void and they don't even know themselves what it is that they're trying to fulfill. They're just out there acting, hoping that one day that they're going to latch on to it. And so those are tough, because if you don't know what you don't know, how can you fix it?
This is so true. This is the point that I have just given up on because I can't figure it out. But going back to, I guess, the comment you were making earlier, I see we have a comment from Glenn Speck in our chat room, and he says what he found was in his business that it was better to have 10 small clients than one big client. You lose a customer through competitive bidding or whatever. That may be 50% of your overall business. You're in trouble. He says if you lose one of 10 of your smaller clients, it's only perhaps a 10% hit on all your sales.
And I think he or she makes an excellent point there regarding that. Kind of goes back to the old saying, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket type argument. And so making sure that you spread the wealth a little bit is extremely true. And I couldn't agree anymore with the individual in the chat room. I think they're right on when it comes to the big client versus the small client. I mean, again, don't get me wrong. We want the big clients out there, and I think those are great to have because you can use that for marketing and prestige and stuff like that. But I think the individual is right on. You have to have those smaller to be able to keep that base, because if you lose somebody, you want to lose them in the smaller because it's not as big of a hit to the bottom line.
Great points, Doug, for now, and Glenn. And Glenn has a further note, diversify. But what an interesting, valuable discussion we're having this evening. You know, back to the point on information. Doug, you stressed that the information, you stressed that the information collected and provided to clients and customers should be valuable, including insider information. Here I would assume on products, services, and client trends, and you note that all information collected and shared should be through legal and ethical ways. But I found it so fascinating that the business owner or employee must be attentive to learning industry information, sharing information where he or she can, and definitely seeking it from their industry colleagues. And you also know that, of course, information sources should be protected and confidentiality withheld if the party so requests. I think that's fascinating information on the importance of your field information or your industry information.
Right, because so many times, well, here's what I'll say that is, again, without information, you can't make decisions. And the more information that you have, the better off you are. I don't know, for me, sometimes going out and just buying somebody a cup of coffee and sitting down, and again, not asking for insider information or anything that's illegal or unethical, but sometimes just going down and talking to sometimes a competitor, sometimes a business partner, sometimes a client, just sitting down, getting their advice, because so many times we're looking at the world through our lens, and sometimes we need to look at it from a different arena. Maybe we need to look from the bottom up, maybe from the top down, from left to right, right to left, in a variety of different ways. And I think so many times that we listen to our clients, but are we really listening to our clients? And so I think sometimes just going down and listening to somebody, sharing some information, and making sure that you're listening to somebody from a different perspective, because my perspective as a salesman to you and from a client back to me, those are two different views that we're looking at. And sometimes what's good for me as an organization may or may not be truly hitting the spots or hitting the areas that you need as a customer. And so I think it's so important to listen to our customers and not just giving them lip service, but seriously sitting down, listening to what they have to say, because sometimes by just looking at it from a different angle makes the picture become a lot more clear.
Right. That's a good way of looking at that.
Those are very helpful details. And, Doug, too, one of your chapter deals with emotion, and if I'm correctly interpreting it here, you don't believe that the businessman should become overly emotional regarding the potential of obtaining a particular client. But emotion can be used positively to engender excitement by the client or customer as to the great value of the service or product that the businessman can offer them. But that emotion should be, the emotion of the businessman or the salesman should be properly focused on promoting the product or service to the potential client. I thought that very helpful.
Right, and like you said, I think emotions, we can be all over the board, and sometimes we can get too attached, too emotional to something. We don't want change because it's always been this way, and so we get emotionally attached to X. And so if we get too emotionally attached to something, it will actually hinder our progression in a situation because we're just too emotionally attached. It's like the old saying is, if you're rich enough that you could, buy your favorite football or baseball or basketball team, you don't want to buy the team that you grew up rooting for all your life because you get too emotional to different players and doing this and that. And you don't look at it as a business because you're too emotionally attached to it. But sometimes emotions can be good for us. If I walk in and I'm really excited and I've got a big smile on my face and I'm really excited and pumped up about something, well, isn't that contagious? Doesn't others feel that? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you can use emotion for good. But it really depends on what you're talking about, what environment we're in, and sometimes we can let our emotions get the best of us. We're so attached to X, Y, and Z that we won't let it go, and yet 2 years later, the company goes bankrupt because we wasn't willing to do X, Y, Z, because we were too emotionally attached to it. Or I walk in and I go, this client's probably not going to buy from me, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to go through the motion. Well, I probably wouldn't want to buy from me either because I don't feel that individual is trying their best in order to achieve or to gain my business. And so the emotion, we wear it on our sleeves so many times. That can be a positive or a negative to us, depending on what type of environment that we're in and what we're referring to. But yeah, sometimes emotion can get the best of us and can make us really make some bad decisions.
That's very helpful information.
Yeah.
What I found fascinating as well, too, was the concept that for our sales professionals, when they are able to obtain a new client or customer, they really have to play into the psychological aspect where they don't want the customer client to think that the sale is to the advantage of the salesman, but rather that the client has made a really savvy or informed choice in obtaining the new product or service.
Yeah. Yes, because you don't want to put the attention on yourself. You want to say, wow, you made a smart choice. It wasn't because I was a slick salesman or I was a good salesman in terms that And so you want to take the attention off yourself and really put it back onto the client and let them know that they made the wise choice and that you're there to serve them, and that they're the ones that made the wise choice. It wasn't that they were sold something, but it was them actually making a wise investment or a wise choice in whatever it is that they were able to sign on with. But here again, I think so many times when it comes into sales, it's all about me. Me. And what was I able to do? And I think sometimes it's hard for us to turn that over about the customer having a good product and taking that attention off of me as a salesman. I would argue that that's where I think a lot of times we come short, is we're too worried about me than we are worried about what's good for the client.
Great.
Well, I want to mention one was very actually all of your material in your book is extremely pragmatic and informative. But there was one chapter that fascinated me, and that was on the importance of perks, both in initial job negotiation and renegotiations with the employer as one's success continues. And the wide spectrum of perks, I love that as well. And the fact that there's such a lucrative component to one's employment compensation package.
Yeah, when we were sitting down writing that chapter number 7, talking about perks, the thing that I always kept going back with Dave when we were collaborating on this piece is I always kept saying that I think so many times that employers think that when it comes to rewarding or providing a perk to an employee, that it's always about money. And I'm a big fan that says, no, I don't think it's all about money. No, I think most of us, if our employer came back to us and said, well, I'm going to give you a raise, I don't think too many of us would turn that down, So I think that money is important, but I also would argue that in today's environment, that's not something that companies are able to do, is to give money all the time. And so I think there's other ways that you can look to reward your employees and keep those employees motivated and happy. And it doesn't have to always be a financial reward. Sometimes just having some time off without having to take a vacation or a sick day, just taking a little perk there, or if somebody comes in a few minutes late or has to leave a little bit early and they're working hard, I think that goes a long way with morale and really having that attitude that says, you know what, my company really looks at me as a valuable employee. But the flip side of that is you have to be able to perform and be one of those high-level employees in order to get that latitude. So when it comes to perks, I think there's creative ways that companies can motivate employees, and it doesn't always have to be about the financial dollars. Not that any of us is going to turn that down if given to us, but I just would argue that it's not always about money. Sometimes there's other things that can motivate somebody in that process.
True.
That's very helpful information. And, we have another question coming in from Glenn, one of our favorite attendees here in the chat room, a wonderful businessman and scientist. Now, his next point is, you get a new customer, you must follow through and make sure you perform up to their standards. And from your book, Doug, I really get the impression that one should always overachieve, go above and beyond what you have contracted with your customer to do for a service or product.
Right, and Glenn's exactly right. Just because you get somebody in the door doesn't mean you need to just drop them and they're part of the cycle. You need to let them know that, like you said earlier, that they made the right choice, that this was a decision that is going to be beneficial for them. And so follow-up is key in making sure that no matter if they're the biggest client or the smallest client you have, when their phone call comes in or email comes in, that they're going to be answered in a very timely manner and responded to one of the stories that we talk about in our book. It talks about a time when Dave and I were traveling, and basically we had a client that we stopped and we walked in, we were seeing, and they needed some supplies from us. Well, I didn't have any of the supplies with me, and I told them that it might be Friday before I got back into my office. This was like on Monday. And I told them that it might be Friday before I'm back in my office that I would make sure that those supplies got ordered. Well, the client said, hey, I understand. I'm not in a rush for it, but when you get to it, that'll be fine. As soon as I got back in my car, I made a phone call up to headquarters, placed the order, and then I let the individual up there know. I said, hey, no matter what I need you to do is to find some guy, tell him that I need you in the man's handwriting to write this out, sign my name, drop it in the mail. Well, I also knew from my location, from where headquarters was, that it was a one-day ship, so they would get it the next day if I had it in the mail by 2 o'clock, which I knew all this was going to be able to be done. And so the point is that I under-promised but over-delivered. So making sure, and by, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday of that week, I received a phone call from the client saying how impressed they was and that they thought that I was going to be gone and I wasn't going to be able to get them their shipment for probably another 10 days or so. And it's just an example of how you just treat everybody. And I'm out there dealing with that particular client wasn't one of my larger clients, but I just wanted them to know that I took to heart what they needed when they needed it. And so I wasn't 100% sure I was going to be able to get everything done to them in a timely manner. So that's why I didn't promise them or give them, I can get that done. But I kind of set something out there in the distance that I knew I could achieve that target date. But so I under-promised and over-delivered, and hopefully I have a client for life in that process because they know that I'm going to take care of them and do whatever I can in order to achieve their needs.
Gotcha. And I think that's the premise that everybody wants to try to achieve because people are always asking, how soon can I have it? And, it seems like they just want everything right away. And, a lot of times you may try to say that you can do it even though you know it might put a strain on you. But in this case, I think you did a really, good job in just giving yourself enough time, but yet leaving them with the feeling that, you were going to look into it right away. So how do you, what would you tell a person who was asking for something that you really didn't have a clue on how long it might take, circumstances changes constantly, and so, you don't want to undersell, but you don't want to oversell as well.
No, and I think that's a great point. And I think so many times that we try to oversell because we're trying to make those impressions and stuff like that. And again, I think it's trying to be that professional persistent. I think it's overpromise, underpromise, overdeliver. I think that all ties in together and being honest and just having a good relationship with your clients, that you're talking to all of them on a regular basis, that they know you as their sales rep or their marketing rep or whatever your title might be, and just letting them know you and letting them know what your work ethics are, what your habits are. And so when you give them an idea or you tell them something, that they can pretty much take it to the bank and says, when Doug says he doesn't know, that means Doug doesn't know, but he's going to work hard in order to get that answer for me. And I really think it's all about building a reputation, letting your clients know who you are, and that you're there to serve them, and you're going to do the best you can in order to serve them. And so I think your past track record and your history all work towards that. It can work for you when you have that type of relationship with your clients and your customers. and that they know that they're going to get the best services that they possibly can. And really, to answer your question, it's just be open and honest to them. If you don't know, you don't know. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as you are open and honest. I think so many times, especially when it comes to sales, that everybody thinks that we have to have an answer. And I think sometimes just being open and honest and say, I don't know, instead of coming back and trying to stretch the truth or cover it up with a little white lie or whatever the case might be. I think most people are going to respect you as somebody in marketing or in sales if you just come back and say, I don't know, but I'm going to look into it and I'm going to try to get that answer to you just as quickly as I can. And then having that regular dialogue with him, staying in touch, letting him know that you haven't forgotten about him, that you really are working towards that end goal, I think that's going to pay dividends for you down the road.
Yeah. Sounds good. Gives me peace of mind anyway.
Well said. And, Doug, an interesting point is, and it's actually really a question, you very aptly describe in the book, that one's business success can benefit others. It can benefit the community, various sectors, travel, employment, new further jobs. Interesting section.
Yeah, I think you were referring to our last chapter where it talks about greed is good, and where your success helps others, even if you don't intend for that to be helpful. And what we really mean there is, well, first of all, if anybody has watched or remember the movie Wall Street and Gordon Gekko, I don't know how you can write a chapter or a book about Gordon Gekko without Chapter 8, Greed is Good, which is his big famous speech that he gives in the movie Wall Street. But so many times, by one being successful or for one, like I said, being successful, one success brings tons of success for other individuals. And sometimes we don't even intend for those consequences to unfold. They just happen, and we don't even know that is the case. And the example that we give in the book, talking about greed is good, for example, is if you had a multimillionaire, let's just say, and he or she might own several homes, might have several cars, a plane, a boat, etc. Well, he or she is going to need help maintaining those toys, maybe that plane or that helicopter or that boat, or if you have more than one home, maybe you're going to have somebody helping you run your property managers in order to keep up with your different estates that you might have. And so by you being successful, you are actually helping others by employing them, being able to have them work for you, and you're being able to bless them in the sense by giving them a job, giving them a way to support their family. And so I think so many times that we look at success as a dirty word and something that is kind of frowned upon, we would argue that success is only helping others, not only yourself, but it is also something that's helping others in the process as well.
Very well put.
Very important to point that out. And even the concept of some of the great philanthropists are those who have achieved mightily in the worlds of commerce and business, and the good they've done with the earnings they've made.
Yes.
Doug, you also note a very pragmatic point that sacrifice is key in being successful, but also that the individual shouldn't give up long-time life rewards as well, not to neglect, for example, family or other duties. That's a very pragmatic point as well.
Well, yeah, and for a lot of people, that's hard to find that balance between work and family because they want them both. I think a lot of people want to be very successful and they want to be able to raise a nice, happy family. But I think a lot of times people struggle trying to find a balance between the two. And a lot of times people will make a choice, and it's usually not the right choice. Usually they will pick a career over their family. And if you had to pick one, hopefully you're going to pick your family over your career. But I think it's possible to be able to find a nice balance between the both of them, your success and being successful in the business world and with your career and your passion, but also being successful at home. And that's not only being with your children, but also making sure that you're spending time with your spouse as well, and not overlooking one in the process and say, well, just because you're at home doesn't mean you're actually home. Because so many times with today's technology, we'll find ourselves, and sometimes I'm guilty of this too. I'm home, but the next thing I notice, I'm on my iPhone checking my emails, or trying to respond back to somebody on an email or a text message for a client. I'm home, and I can say, well, I'm home, but I'm not really home because my mind's somewhere else. My mind's on my work, my mind's on my career, etc. And so I think so many times we try to kid ourselves in that process, and we need to work, and I think it really is a job, is trying to find that balance between family and a career, and that's not easy. That's not an easy thing to do because, especially if you have kids, we have a 9 and a 5-year-old here, and so they're involved in a lot of different things, and so we find ourselves on the go a lot with all their school activities and their sporting events, etc. And we want them to be happy. We want them to grow in that process. But then I'm like, well, Dad's got to be going. Dad's got to travel. Dad's got to do this. Got to do that. And it is a struggle from time to time, trying to find that balance between work and family.
Yeah, that balance is important.
It really is. And what's funny is if it gets out of control, I have found that my kids, my wife too, but really my kids aren't afraid to point it out to me. And I think it's because of their age. They're so young. And we all know with kids, they're just going to tell you the way it is. They're not going to sugarcoat it. They're going to tell you exactly the way they feel, the way they see it. And you know what? Sometimes that's the best advice, is to see it through somebody that's not going to sugarcoat it and just tell you what needs to be done. And, you know, I'm as guilty as the next person with this. Sometimes I get caught up in my career, caught up in my world, and I need my family to say, what are you doing? What's your plan? What's your purpose here? And then I have to step back and go, you're right. I've got to change some things. And so it's a constant battle. It's a constant struggle, but one that's important because we have to work. But at the same time, I don't want to work all the time. Then I'm neglecting the ones that truly love me. So it's a constant struggle. I won't say battle because I don't mean it in the word that the way it sounds, but it is a constant struggle trying to find that balance.
Indeed.
Yeah,
and you know,
I guess because things change so much.
Yes.
Indeed, they do. The new innovations in technology, changes in market, now the ascendancy of the global market. Very, very interesting. You know, this is a little bit off track, but, you know, I've always been a person who considers American companies really to be preeminent on the global scene. And I know, of course, there's so many transnational companies with their original or their principal place of business in the United States. I hope that continues.
Well, yes, I really do too. That we're hopefully we're going to continue to be the leader in a lot of different things. You know, not only leading here but internationally as well. And I share your sentiments as well. Hopefully that's going to continue. That people are going to continue to look at the United States as a leader, somebody that's going to be setting the stage, setting the barriers, if you will, for growth, whether it's technology or service, whatever category that we want to look at. Hopefully we're going to be continuing to be that leader. But I think there's a lot of things that are out there that's going to challenge us. on that scale. And the question is, are we going to have what it takes to continue to be a leader out there? And I think that's something that's unknown. You know, what's that next generation going to look like? What is their hunger? What's their desire? Are they still going to want to put in the hard work and the effort that I would argue that made this country great? And unfortunately, that's yet to be determined.
Very well said. And Doug, where can our listeners get a copy of the book? I know at the Global Newsmaker Focus website, we've noted both the Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com links. And I did want to mention to the audience that the co-authors' full names are noted on the book cover, David L. Bowman and Douglas E. Hess. And the name of the book, again, is Gordon Gekko, CEO, Lessons from Wall Street for Winning Attitude. And, Doug, any other pointers about how to get the book?
Yes, or they can go to our Facebook page as well, which is just Gordon Gekko, CEO, Lessons from Wall Street for Winning Attitude. And we have an app out there that they can log on to and get a copy of the book as well. But Amazon, Barnes & Noble, like you mentioned, are other ways that they can definitely get a copy of the book.
Excellent. Well, Doug, thank you for a highly engaging and informative interview. Please reconsider being a future guest for the program. I know Vernell will want to say goodnight as well.
Well, thank you very much for being our host. We really enjoyed your conversation, and I know our listening audience got quite an earful.
Well, it was definitely my pleasure, and I enjoyed being on tonight with you ladies. I truly enjoyed it.
Thank you again, Doug, and great weekend and week to you and our listeners. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time with us on Global Newsmaker Focus. Our website with contact email can be found at globalnewsmakerfocus.com. We appreciate your comments and guest suggestions, and we definitely appreciate this wonderful guest this evening. Thank you again, Doug. Great weekend and week to everyone.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Deck the halls with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la. 'Tis the season to be jolly, fa la 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 la.